Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt like people slowly start drifting away from you and you don't even know why? You replay every conversation in your head. You wonder what changed. But here's the truth. Sometimes it's not about what you say. It's about the subtle behaviors that sneak into our interactions, the ones we don't even realize are costing us the closeness we crave. Today, I want to talk to you about 5 silent behaviors that push people away. The ones we don't notice until it's too late. And my goal isn't to shame you, it's to awaken awareness. Because when we understand what repels connection, we can start to reverse it. This one's sneaky. Someone shares a problem, and instead of just listening, we jump straight into solution mode. You mean well? You want to help. But sometimes people don't need fixing. They need feeling. They need to be seen, not solved. You think you're being low maintenance or easygoing by not expressing how you feel. But the truth is, withholding emotions sends a signal. I don't trust you with my truth. And nothing builds distance like emotional silence. We all want to be understood. But when the desire to be right outweighs the desire to be connected, you start winning arguments and losing people. What if you chose understanding over ego? You share a story. They share a story. But if every conversation finds its way back to you, people start to feel unseen. Connection isn't just about being interesting. It's about being interested. When you assume what someone's thinking or overanalyze a text, you're not protecting yourself, you're disconnecting. Real connection only happens in reality, not in the stories you spin in your head. Now, I promised you 5 behaviors, but I'm going to leave you with one final takeaway. We've all been there. A friend, partner, or colleague opens up about something that's weighing on them, and before they've even finished the sentence, our mind kicks into high gear, searching for solutions. It's almost automatic. We interrupt with advice, give them a list of steps, or tell them what we would do. The intent is good. We care, and we want to help ease their pain. But here's the catch in trying to solve their problem. We often miss what they're really looking for in that moment: connection. People don't always want an answer. Sometimes they just want a witness to their struggle. When we jump straight into fix it mode, we inadvertently send a subtle but damaging message. Your feelings make me uncomfortable, and I need to resolve them quickly. This can make the other person feel dismissed or emotionally invalidated. Instead of feeling heard, they feel hurried, like there's no room for their process or their pain. Think about how it feels when you're upset and someone tells you to just calm down or look on the bright side. It might sound helpful, but in truth, it shuts the door on a deeper conversation. The desire to fix often stems from our discomfort, not theirs. True listening is not about silence while the other person talks. It's about being fully present without the pressure to respond, rescue, or redirect. It's eye contact. It's nodding, asking gentle questions, staying with the emotion without rushing it. It's saying, that sounds really hard, instead of, here's what you should do. When people feel heard, they naturally open up more. They trust you. They feel safer. And paradoxically, that's often when the clarity they need to solve their own issue begins to emerge. Not because you handed them the answer, but because You gave them the space to find it. The irony is many people don't realize that by trying to be helpful, they're actually making it harder for others to feel close to them. It's not your advice that creates intimacy. It's your presence. It's the rare experience of someone sitting across from you and saying, without words, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here with you. That energy creates emotional gravity. It pulls people in. The most magnetic people aren't the ones with all the right answers. They're the ones who make others feel seen while they're still figuring things out. And that's a power we all have once we slow down and learn to listen without fixing. So many people grow up learning to minimize their emotions. We hear things like, don't be so sensitive, just tough it out, or no one wants to hear you complain. Over time, this teaches us a dangerous lesson that our feelings are inconvenient, messy, or even burdensome to others. And so we adapt. We suppress our sadness, downplay our excitement, and mask our anxiety with fake smiles. We convince ourselves that we're being low maintenance or easy to be around. But in reality, we're slowly becoming emotionally invisible. We think we're protecting the relationship, but what we're really doing is starving it of truth. When you withhold how you genuinely feel, whether it's hurt, happiness, jealousy, or appreciation, you're robbing the other person of the opportunity to really know you. Think about it. How can someone love or care for the real you if you're always editing yourself to be more acceptable? Emotional connection doesn't come from being agreeable all the time. It comes from being authentic. Even if your feelings are inconvenient or imperfect, they are real. And when you share them in an honest, respectful way, you're not being too much. You're giving the relationship a chance to grow roots. People aren't drawn to perfection. They're drawn to truth. You might think that showing emotion makes you look weak or needy, but in reality, it's the opposite. Vulnerability, when done with intention, is a signal of strength. It says, I trust you enough to let you see me. That's a gift. And ironically, it's often the very thing that deepens someone's affection for you. When you're open about your needs or your fears, it invites the other person to meet you in that space, to show up, to support you, to care in a more meaningful way. But if you constantly pretend everything's fine, don't be surprised if people stop checking in altogether. This emotional withholding can quietly push people away. They might not even be able to name why they feel distant from you. Only that there's something missing, a wall they can't quite see, but can definitely feel. And here's the heartbreaking part. Sometimes they start to pull away just when you're feeling most in need of connection. Not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to get close to someone who won't let them in. By holding everything in, you create the illusion of harmony, but at the cost of real intimacy. And what's left is a connection that looks fine from the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. One of the deepest human desires is to be understood, to feel like someone truly gets us. But in the heat of a disagreement, something dangerous can take over the need to be right. It creeps in silently, often disguised as logic, clarity, or just being honest. Before we even realize it, the conversation stops being about connection and starts being about winning. The goal shifts from how can we understand each other to how can I prove that I'm right and you're wrong. And when that happens, even if you win the argument, you lose something far more valuable: emotional closeness. When we prioritize being right, we often start interrupting, defending, and invalidating without even noticing it. We might say things like, "That's not what happened," or "You're overreacting," or "You're just being sensitive," thinking we're correcting the record. But in truth, we're shutting the other person down. Their experience becomes secondary to our ego. And over time, that dynamic erodes trust. No one wants to open up to someone who constantly makes them feel small, misunderstood, or dismissed. In trying to assert our truth, we can unintentionally invalidate someone else's reality. And connection can't survive that. What's powerful is learning to shift the focus. Instead of defending your position, try leaning into theirs. Ask questions. Repeat what they said in your own words to show you're listening. Say things like, "Help me understand where you're coming from," or "Tell me more about what that felt like for you." This doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. It simply means you value the relationship more than the point you're trying to make. And ironically, when someone feels truly heard, they're more likely to soften, to hear you, and to arrive at a mutual understanding. People don't leave because you were wrong. They leave because they didn't feel respected. They didn't feel safe expressing themselves without being corrected. When you drop the need to be right and lean into understanding, something beautiful happens. The conversation becomes a bridge instead of a battleground. You stop competing and start collaborating. You begin to see disagreements not as threats, but as opportunities to grow together. And in doing so, you become the kind of person people want to stay close to, not because you're perfect, but because you make them feel seen, respected, and heard. Conversations are meant to be a dance, a natural back and forth where both people feel seen and valued. But sometimes, without even realizing it, we start hogging the spotlight. We share a story, and before the other person has fully responded, we're diving into another one. Or worse, we take their experience and use it as a launchpad for our own. They mention a tough day, and we jump in with, "You think that's bad? Let me tell you about my week." It's not malicious. Most of us do it out of excitement or a desire to relate. But over time, it sends a subtle message. This conversation is more about me than you. Being self-centered in conversations doesn't always look like bragging. Sometimes it's just a failure to be fully present with the other person. We might nod while secretly waiting for our turn to speak, or we offer surface-level responses that shift the focus back onto ourselves. What we miss is the power of curiosity. When we get genuinely curious about someone, their thoughts, their feelings, their story, we give them one of the most rare and precious gifts: our undivided attention. In a world that's constantly yelling for attention, someone who listens deeply is magnetic. Asking thoughtful questions, not out of obligation, but out of true interest, can completely transform a connection. It tells the other person, "I see you. I care about what's going on in your world." These don't have to be deep, philosophical questions. Sometimes it's as simple as, "What was that like for you?" Or, How did that make you feel? When we create space for others to express themselves fully, they often walk away from the interaction feeling lighter, closer, and more connected. And they'll associate that feeling with you. Here's what's ironic. People often try to be interesting to gain affection or approval, but the most interesting people are usually the ones who show the most interest in others. When you stop trying to impress and start trying to understand, you create a warmth that people remember. You become a safe place, someone others want to open up to, lean on, and come back to. Being a great conversationalist isn't about being the center of attention. It's about making others feel like they are. One of the most common ways we disconnect from people without even realizing it is by leaving the moment and jumping into our own minds. Maybe someone takes a little longer to reply to a message, or they seem quieter than usual, and suddenly our thoughts start racing. Did I say something wrong? Are they mad at me? Maybe they're losing interest. We begin to fill in the blanks with worst case scenarios, creating entire emotional stories based on a single ambiguous action. And the more we sit in that imagined narrative, the more anxious and withdrawn we become, not from what actually happened, but from what we think it means. This tendency to mind, read, or overanalyze is usually rooted in fear of rejection, abandonment, or not being enough. But instead of calming those fears with clarity, we feed them with assumptions. The tragedy is when we believe our assumptions too deeply, we start reacting to people not based on their actual behavior, but based on the story we've invented. We may become colder, more distant, or overly defensive, and then the other person starts pulling away for real. Not because of what happened, but because we're no longer engaging with them. We're engaging with the version of them that exists only in our head. Real connection can only exist in real conversations, not imaginary ones. That means if something feels off, you ask. If you're unsure what someone meant, you clarify. If your insecurities are flaring up, you share them honestly rather than letting them distort your perception. This doesn't mean you have to confront every little thing, but it does mean you stop assuming and start communicating. A simple, honest check in like, hey, I noticed you seemed quiet earlier. Is everything okay? Is infinitely more powerful than spiraling in silence, because clarity ends stories and clarity reconnects people. Overthinking convinces you you're protecting yourself, when in fact you're often just isolating yourself. The irony is many of the things we stress over are things that could be solved or even soothed in a 5-minute conversation. But instead, we choose the safety of assumption over the vulnerability of truth. And every time we do, we step a little further away from the people we care about. The most emotionally intelligent people aren't the ones who can predict what others are thinking. They're the ones who stay rooted in reality and have the courage to ask instead of guess. In a world full of noise, presence is one of the rarest and most valuable forms of connection. We've all had moments where someone is physically there with us, but mentally and emotionally 1,000 miles away. They're nodding, maybe even smiling, but their eyes flicker to their phone. Their responses are delayed, and you can tell they're not really with you. It leaves you feeling unseen, even in their company. The sad part is Many people live their lives this way, half available, half aware, always multitasking. And over time, that emotional absence becomes the very thing that drives others away, even if they can't explain exactly why. Presence is magnetic because it signals something profound. You matter. When you're fully engaged, looking someone in the eye, responding with intention, noticing the small shifts in their tone or body language, you're giving more than attention. You're giving validation. You're saying, I'm not just hearing your words, I'm experiencing them with you. That kind of energy is rare. It slows time down. It makes people feel important, safe, and appreciated. And it doesn't require grand gestures. It requires attention without distraction, even in the simplest moments. Too often, people chase connection through planning elaborate dates, sending long messages, trying to say the right things. But what most people actually crave isn't more words or actions, it's presence. They want to feel like they're the only person in the room when they're talking to you, that their thoughts and emotions aren't just being received, but held. You don't need to fix, impress, or entertain to make someone feel loved. You just need to be with them, really with them, without checking out halfway through the moment. The truth is, presence is a discipline. It requires you to put down your phone, quiet your thoughts, and resist the urge to jump ahead in your mind. It asks you to slow down, to listen deeply, and to care enough to stay. And while it may sound simple, few people truly master it. But those who do become unforgettable, not because they were flashy or flawless, but because being around them felt like coming home. When someone consistently brings presence into their relationships, they create an atmosphere of calm, connection, and safety, the kind that people are drawn to again and again. So here's the truth. Most of us don't push people away because we're bad, selfish, or unloving. We push people away because we're unaware. We slip into habits, fixing instead of listening, holding back instead of expressing, arguing to be right instead of choosing to understand. We make conversations about ourselves without realizing it, and we live inside our own assumptions instead of real dialogue. We get distracted, we get scared, we get tired. But the beautiful thing about connection is that it doesn't require perfection. It just requires presence. It requires intention. And the moment you become aware of the behaviors that block love, you also become capable of shifting them. So ask yourself, not, how can I get people to stay? But rather, how can I show up in a way that makes people feel safe, seen, and valued when they're with me? Because when you do that genuinely, consistently, you don't have to chase connection. It stays, it deepens, and it grows with you. Thank you.